Hello, Molly May. How are you? I think next week it's your birthday. But first it's your big sissy's Flo's birthday. And then it's your birthday. And you're going to be how many? 1, 2, 3. You're going to be 3. Goodness me. You're going to be such a big girl when Nanny gets to come and see you. You'll be 3. 3. Wow. And then you've got your present for Nanny, Deb and Poppy. Big box with lots of things inside. Now today, I have a book for you called Mr. Potter's Pigeon. You see Mr. Potter? He's got a big moustache and he's got a pigeon in his hands. That must be very special. Mr. Potter's Pigeon. You know a pigeon is a bird? You see those near your house. They're grey and they go like that. So Mr. Potter's Pigeon. So Mr. Potter lived quietly by himself at 35 Station Road near the railway line. At the back of the house there was a garden with nettles, dock, cow parsley and tall foxgloves that grew thickly in the shade. At the end of the garden there was a shed, but there were no rakes, no spades, wheelbarrows or oil cans in it, because Mr. Potter kept something much more important there. His racing pigeon. You see? There's his garden. And down the back, that's Misha. Can you hear her? She wants me to throw the ball, but she'll have to wait till I finish the story. Can you see the house down the back? That's where he keeps his racing pigeon. What do you think a racing pigeon does? Do you think it's like a running race? A flying race? One Friday evening, Mr. Potter walked slowly down the brick path to his shed. He often went there when the garden was falling still and told the pigeon about the things that were in his mind. Tonight, he was thinking of a big race to be held on Sunday. When pigeons race, they are put in their cages and carried far away and then set free. The pigeon which can find its way home the most quickly is the winner. Mr. Potter was longing for his pigeon to win. She was young and the others were fast, and every pigeon, he said, does not win the race. Mr. Potter was a man of very few words. His friends sometimes asked him why he looked so sad, and he would say that it was only his moustache that made him look sad. He had an old photograph of his father, who had a grey moustache as well. A moustache is like hair on your top lip. I'll show you in a minute. Not Nanny's moustache, but Mr. Potter's. So he had an old photograph of his father who had a grey moustache, and he looked sad too. He was smiling all the time though, said Mr. Potter. You just couldn't see it. Can you see? There's Mr. Potter and his moustache. You can't see his smile underneath, can you? Because it's hiding his lip. That night, the chimney cast its shadow like a dark blue ruler down the slates of the roof. The moon was full and bright. Mr. Potter was sitting safe in his kitchen, but outside something was moving, shadow to shadow in the dark garden. Over by the shed, the tall leaves of the iris bed rustled mysteriously. Then they parted by 2 cold, clear eyes that glittered like glass lemons in the moonlight. It was Lupin, the cat from next door. Without a sound, he slid into the shed where Mr. Potter's pigeon was fast asleep. That's naughty. Can you see? There's Lupin, the cat, with his eyes look like lemon. What did they say they look like? Look like lemons for eyes. Hiding. I wonder what's going to happen to poor Mr. Potter's pigeon. The tip of Lupin's tail, long and black, twitched from side to side as he sat still beneath the sleeping pigeon's cage. And then he leapt. His claws caught the metal latch and the door sprang open, and Mr. Potter's pigeon awoke with a start. She glanced at the shape of Lupin crouched below her, eyes ablazing. And all of a sudden, and clattering of wings, she flew over his head and out into the clear night sky, leaving Lupin amazed and striking at the empty air with his flashing claws. Mr. Potter's pigeon rose high above the village, and the moon seemed bright and close. Below her, the railway lines shone like tight wires, and that led her to a curving river that reflected the dark trees along its banks. She flew down to the silver course through strange fields and silent woods, and saw a line like the blade of a knife lying on the horizon. There was a sharp taste in the air, and she heard a low whispering sound. It was the sea. And you see, there's Lupin at the bottom, jumping, but Mr. Potter's pigeon flew high up in the night. He's got a big fright, but I don't know if he knows where he is. Look, he flew over the rivers, and then over to the sea, down the very back. He's flown an awfully long way. What if he gets lost? A beam of light swept across the waves and vanished. Then it came again and was gone again, and it was gone. A shaft of light shining out to sea on a rock surrounded by foam and roaring waves stood tall. It was a lighthouse. The tired pigeon dropped out of the sky like a soft stone onto the narrow window ledge and fell fast asleep. All through the night, the lighthouse flashed its warning lights across an empty sea, while far away and warm in bed, Mr. Potter slept untroubled. Can you see the lighthouse? It's a big, tall building. And look down the bottom. There's the pigeon fast asleep. The lighthouse sends a light out to the sea for the ships when they go past to keep an eye out for the rocks, so they don't crash. Mr. Potter's pigeon awoke before dawn. It was cold, and a bitter wind blew around the lighthouse. She looked out to sea, and the waves were empty, except for a small black fishing boat on its way home after fishing for the night. She looked towards land, the hills, and they rose comfortingly, with trees and church spires pointing to the village where she knew she belonged. That was enough. And the sun rose. She left the lighthouse behind her and set off to find her way home to Mr. Potter. You see, there's the lighthouse and the cliffs, making sure that the boat doesn't crash into the rocks. There's the pigeon. A long way to go back to the hills. Mr. Potter was having breakfast when he suddenly dropped his spoon. The shed door he had forgotten to shut the night before. He ran down the brick path and found the pigeon's cage empty, except for one grey feather. "Oh no," groaned Mr. Potter. He could not believe it, and stared at the cage, expecting the pigeon to appear any moment, but she did not. Mr. Potter fetched his binoculars and looked worriedly at the sky. And a voice in his head said, "She's gone for good. She's gone for good." But he kept on looking. Hours passed and the sun grew hot. So he took off his jacket. Get down. Stop. She keeps wanting the ball, but I'm not doing it yet. I'll show you a video of Misha in a minute. He took off his jacket because it was getting hot, and he put on a sun hat made from an old folded page of newspaper. "Oh dear," he said. Mr. Potter sadly said to himself, "You can't win a race without a pigeon, you know." See, Mr. Potter? They're binoculars. They're like glasses to look in the sky. There's his hat made of paper, sitting in his chair in an empty birdhouse. Oh dear. Lupin walked across the garden and rubbed himself along Mr. Potter's legs, purring loudly. Mr. Potter bent down and stroked him. "A cat will always be a cat," he observed with a long sigh. Just as he was thinking that Lupin looked especially well fed, Mr. Potter heard a whirring of wings. And above him he looked up eagerly. There was his pigeon sitting calmly on the roof of the shed, as if she'd never been away. Mr. Potter raised his hands, and the pigeon flew down into them, and he pressed a soft grey body against his cheek. "You've come back for the race then," he said with a chuckle, and the pigeon blinked her beady black eyes. That night, Mr. Potter slept well. He dreamed that his pigeon asked him to fly with her, and they soared over a rainbow in the sky. But there's Mr. Potter holding his pigeon. You still can't tell if he's happy because the moustache is hiding his smile. Oh, there's his dream. Dreaming that he's flying with his pigeon over a rainbow over the chimneys. On the day of the race, Mr. Potter got up at 5 o'clock, put his pigeon in the wicker travelling basket, and he looked up at the mantelpiece and imagined how a silver winning cup would look beside his father's photograph. "Very nice indeed," he said, as he went down to the station. It would be very nice to win. It was 6 o'clock when he arrived at the platform. The train was due to leave at 6:10 to take the pigeons on their long journey to the starting place. But Mr. Potter waited with his pigeon on his knees until the guard came, put her carefully inside, and blew his whistle. Mr. Potter felt like he was losing her all over again. "She'll be all right," the guard said as the train left the station with a blast of steam. When everything was ready, the race began. Mr. Potter's pigeon flew out of her basket, but to her surprise, she found a thick grey fog was hiding on the countryside below. On every side she saw confused shapes of the other pigeons flying in all directions. Then something white glistened nearby. She nearly fell out of the sky with surprise. There was the lighthouse where she had slept, ghostly and familiar in the fog. Now she knew exactly where she had to go and which direction. She flew back up the river towards the railway and 35 Station Road as if it had been the clearest day she'd ever seen. Look at poor Mr. Potter sitting at the train waiting. Oh, he does look sad. Wow, I think Mr. Potter's pigeon might have won the race. Look at all the pigeons flying in the sky in all directions. But Mr. Potter's pigeon knows the way to go. Mr. Potter sat waiting in his kitchen with the rain falling down outside. Again and again he peered through the rain, but the sky was empty. So he hummed a little tune to himself. "A watched pot never boils," said Mr. Potter as he filled the kettle for another cup of tea. Hours passed and the rain went on falling, but the sky was empty. And the rain was still falling and the sky was still empty. And Mr. Potter finished his 5th cup of tea. Look, there he is, waiting, drinking his tea. At last the rain stopped, and a flicker of grey, like a speck of ash, appeared on the clearing sky. A pigeon! Mr. Potter held his breath as it came closer. For a moment it seemed that it was going to fly straight overhead, and then it came circling down towards the garden. Mr. Potter ran outside and his pigeon flew gently into his waiting hands. "My beauty," he said. And then a strange thing happened. Mr. Potter heard the sound of beating wings above him. It grew louder and louder and louder. And then all the pigeons that had been lost in the fog came tumbling out of the clouds. They had followed Mr. Potter's pigeon home. On and on they came until the lawn was a rustling carpet of grey feathers and the air was filled with soft voices. Mr. Potter's pigeon came home first and won the race. Mr. Potter laughed behind his mustache. Who would have thought that? And who would? Can you see? There's Mr. Potter and the pigeon. And look, all the other pigeons have come down into his garden. And look, there is the first prize, a cup on his trophy beside the picture of his dad. I like that one. So in a minute, I'll send you a video as well of Blair. I don't know if you remember Poppy Brett's son, Blair. He has a dog called Misha, and Misha is a fluffy little dog, and when you throw a ball, she goes and collects it all the time. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoy that, and Nanny's got some texture on her thumb, hasn't she? I've been making something for Parker. Do you remember Parker? We made him a garage with some coloured cars, and I was colouring in blue and purple. I'm going to see you soon, Marley May. It'll be in probably too many days to count on my hands, but it won't be long. But I will talk to you next week when it's your birthday, and I hope you enjoy the story. Okay, my lovely? Do you remember Nanny did Kipsis? We haven't done a video for a little while. Do you remember? I love you. I'll send you an extra big one. Mwah! And don't forget to wish your big sissy Flo a happy birthday. I think it's either Tuesday or Monday or Tuesday. I'm not sure because our days are different here in Australia as what they are in England. Okay. All right, my darling little Marley mate. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.